We've all heard it, haven't we? That standard financial advice. Go to school, get a good job, work hard.
Save your money, get out of debt.
Right. And invest for the long term in the stock market. It's like ingrained in us.
It really is. Passed down.
But honestly, in today's world, with central banks printing trillions and, well, everything changing so fast with technology, does that advice still hold up?
Or is it? Maybe.
Yeah.
Obsolete. Are we clinging to old ideas?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. This is a deep dive.
Yeah, we're looking at a really interesting long interview with Robert Kiyosaki, the rich dad, poor dad guy.
Ah, right. Controversial figure, but influential.
Definitely. This is from the Business Motiversity YouTube channel. And our goal here really is to pull out and clarify his ideas. They're often pretty counterintuitive,
Yep.
about wealth, debt, education.
And mindset, crucially.
Exactly. Mindset. So hopefully you, the listener, will get some surprising insights, maybe make you rethink your own approach a bit.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Because Kiyosaki doesn't just question that old advice.
No, he flat out calls it the most obsolete idea.
Right. He directly attacks that whole playbook. School, job, save, get out of debt, stock market. So what's his main issue with it?
Well, think about the saving part. He asks, pretty bluntly, why would you save money when they're printing trillions of dollars?
Because the printing devalues the money you're saving.
Precisely. Your savings, they just lose purchasing power over time. He actually says, cash is trash.
Wow, cash is trash.
And savers are losers. It's strong stuff. Really goes against everything most of us learn about, building a nest egg.
Definitely a radical departure.
And he doesn't stop there. Getting out of debt. He says that's obsolete too.
Wait, getting out of debt is obsolete?
Yeah. He argues you should actually learn how to use debt.
Learn how to use debt? Okay, that flies in the face of almost everything you hear. Cash is trash, use debt.
Yeah.
This really shakes things up.
It forces you to question assumptions, for sure.
And this way of thinking, it connects to how he views us, right? He talks about everyone having like a poor person, a middle-class person, and a rich person inside them.
Exactly. The middle class part wants the security, the steady paycheck.
Yeah, that safety net.
But the core difference he focuses on is the entrepreneurial mindset. It's fascinating how he explains it.
Oh, so?
Well, he tells his story about his rich dad refusing to pay him. Just flat out refused.
Why? That sounds harsh.
Rich dad apparently said, the paycheck was one of the most damaging things you can take in your life. Because, Kiyosaki explains, the moment you take a paycheck, you're an employee.
Huh. So it's not just about the money itself, but the psychological shift, becoming dependent?
That's his argument. It limits your drive to create your own wealth, makes you reliant.
So the security blanket of a paycheck actually becomes a kind of cage.
Yeah.
Trapping you in that employee mindset.
That seems to be his view. An entrepreneur, he says, has a different kind of freedom. Like, if Rich Dad folded, I just start another company.
Right, resilient.
Or even, if my government doesn't like me, I move to another country. It's about adaptability.
So being an entrepreneur isn't just starting a business.
No, he stresses it's really the mindset and the skill sets and the different set of rules.
A different rule book entirely.
And here's another controversial bit. He says, entrepreneurs work for free.
Work for free? How does that work?
Well, initially at least, their focus isn't the immediate paycheck, it's building assets that will generate wealth down the line.
Okay, I can see the logic, building for the future, but wow, giving up a steady income, that's a huge leap of faith for most people. It's scary.
It absolutely is. It requires shifting from relying on external security, like a job, to building internal resilience.
Internal focus versus external focus.
Exactly. He talks about that a lot. A real entrepreneur controls inside here, pointing to himself, not outside there.
So when things go wrong, setbacks happen.
They don't see it as the end of the world. They see it as a chance to go up higher, get stronger, smarter, better, even happier, instead of just blaming everything else.
It's about your reaction, your internal state, building your future on your own terms.
Right. Which brings us to education, doesn't it?
Yeah, because this thinking obviously clashes with traditional schooling. Kiyosaki famously asked his dad, who was head of education, right, why don't we learn about money in school?
And the answer he got was pretty telling. The government doesn't let us teach that subject.
Oof. That's quite an indictment of the system.
It really is. Kiyosaki's view is basically that schools are set up to teach you to be an employee.
Or maybe a professional, like a doctor or a lawyer.
Sure, those two. But never about money. Not really about how it works. He points out there's no real focus on, practical business stuff.
Like accounting, debt, taxes.
Yeah.
The things you actually need.
Exactly. The stuff entrepreneurs deal with daily. Which raises that big question. If schools aren't teaching this, What are they really preparing us for?
And he makes that distinction, doesn't he, between real teachers and fake teachers?
He does, yeah. It's pretty blunt. Real teachers, for him, are people who do what they teach every day.
Like his accountants, his lawyers, people in the trenches.
Right. And fake teachers,
Yeah.
they teach subjects they don't themselves practice.
It's a provocative way to put it.
And then he connects it to Moore's Law, the tech thing.
How does she apply that to education?
He suggests information doubles every 18 months. So by the time you graduate, a lot of what you learned might already be.
Obsolete.
Exactly. Making the traditional model maybe less effective for the real fast-changing world of money.
Okay, so if school isn't teaching it, and textbooks aren't the answer, how did his rich dad teach him? I heard it involved a game.
That's right. Monopoly, actually.
Seriously, Monopoly.
Yeah. Rich Dad used it to teach the formula. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel.
The classic Monopoly strategy.
But as a metaphor, you see. For acquiring assets, start small, the greenhouses,
Yeah.
then consolidate into something bigger, the red hotel. It's about systematically building up income-producing assets.
So like buying small houses to eventually get an apartment building? Maybe?
Precisely. Kiyosaki gives this amazing real-life example of his rich dad. He apparently bought up lots of little shops in Waikiki over time
Why?
to get the land underneath them. He assembled enough land to build the Hyatt Regency Hotel there.
Wow. That's playing the long game.
And that hotel eventually sold for, wait for it, $800 million.
Good grief.
Yeah.
So it wasn't about earning a salary. It was about acquiring assets, putting them together.
And leveraging them, which brings us back to debt.
Right. He clearly practices what he preaches about using assets. But that connection to debt and taxes, he says they make the rich richer, but the poor and middle class poorer. How does that work?
This is probably one of his most controversial points, but also central to his philosophy. He uses himself as an example.
Okay.
He talks about having like $300 million in debt, but then he refinanced it, dropped the interest rate from maybe 5% down to 2.5%.
Okay. That saves a lot on interest payment.
A fortune every month, he says, because the debt is tied to assets that are producing income. It's good debt in his book. His core idea is the rich don't work for money.
They make money work for them.
Kind of. They create businesses as entrepreneurs, and they acquire real estate. They use debt as a tool to do that faster and bigger.
So they're playing by different rules, using the financial system itself.
Exactly. And the tax part is key, too. He claims he pays 0 tax.
Zero tax. How is that even legal?
Well, he explains it like this. Say he makes $1 million from a business. Instead of paying income tax on it, he immediately invests it into real estate.
Okay.
Then, he says, the banks give him leverage, like a 4-to-1 step up. So his $1 million investment lets him control maybe $4 million worth of property.
Because it's secured by the asset.
Right. And the tax laws often treat debt and investments used to acquire or improve assets differently than, say, salary income. There are deductions, depreciation, ways to legally defer or reduce the tax burden, especially with real estate. So that initial $1 million isn't taxed as income. It's used to buy assets that grow and generate more income, often with further tax advantages. It's a completely different way of handling money.
A different rule book, like you said. Which probably feels pretty relevant given his view on the current economy. He calls it the most dangerous time ever.
Yeah, he's not optimistic about the mainstream economy. Nope. Mainly because it's also interconnected now, globally.
And the money printing we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah. He throws out some staggering numbers, like central banks printing $125 billion every single day.
Every day. That's hard to even comprehend.
He tries to put it in perspective, says it's like funding 5 World War IIs per day, just to show the sheer scale of currency creation.
Which, in his view, has consequences.
Big ones. He looks at the rising debt-to-GDP ratios and basically says we're bankrupt, the whole system.
And he predicts.
A global depression, where he says the average person, they'll get wiped out.
Ouch. Especially savers, right? If cash is trash.
Exactly. He thinks savers holding cash would be the biggest losers as inflation potentially skyrockets.
Man, that sounds incredibly bleak. A really grim forecast.
It does. But interestingly, he also offers this analogy, a way to frame it personally.
Okay, what's that?
He calls it a metamorphosis, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
A metamorphosis in a financial crisis.
Yeah. He suggests looking at financial struggle, or even a big crisis like the one he predicts, as a kind of cocoon, a period of pressure and change.
Okay, I see where he's going.
And the big question then becomes, what do you emerge as? Do you come out of it a victim, crushed by it all? Or do you emerge as a butterfly? Someone who uses the pressure to transform, to become healthier and wealthier, stronger, because you adapted and learned new rules.
So turning crisis into opportunity, basically.
Right. He actually says that for someone with the right mindset, this could be the best thing that ever happened to you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's about how you choose to respond.
That puts a different spin on it. So wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway for us listening? It feels like Kiyosaki's core message is about challenging our own thinking.
Absolutely. He says we need to check the expiration date on our brains. Question those potentially obsolete ideas about money we've just accepted.
Like saving cash, avoiding all debt.
Yeah. And instead, cultivate that internal focus we talked about. Take control of your own financial situation, your personal economy, regardless of the chaos outside. Think differently.
And that links back to something else he said, right? About why there will always be poor people.
Yeah, that's a really profound point he makes. He says, the poor will always be amongst us because it starts up here, pointing to his head.
Meaning it's a mindset thing.
He connects it to a fear mentality, and specifically to the language people use, saying, I can't afford it.
Which closes off possibilities.
Exactly. He contrasts that with what his rich dad taught him. Always ask, how can I afford it?
Because the question opens the mind.
A statement closes the mind. It forces you to think creatively, to find solutions, instead of just shutting down.
That's a powerful final thought.
It is. So maybe the challenge for you, the listener, after hearing all this, is what Kiyosaki advises. You find your game. Find your own path financially.
Whether that's business or real estate or something else.
Right. Whatever fits you. But the key is to be proactive, to learn the rules that work now and find your own way to create wealth, not just follow advice that might be long past its sell-by date.